Mafia boss despised the girl who refused his money until she bled, protecting his secrets. The fluorescent lights of the Harbor 24 diner hummed with a low, electrical buzz that seemed to drill directly into Jenna Morales' skull. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, a time when the world should have been asleep, but the diner was alive with the clatter of silverware and the heavy scent of stale coffee and frying bacon. Jenna wiped a rag across table 4, her shoulders aching with a dull, persistent throb. She had been on her feet for 10 hours straight, following a full day of classes at the university, and her bank account still hovered dangerously close to zero. The bell above the door chimed, not with the usual timid ring of a straggler looking for pancakes, but with an aggressive insistence. The atmosphere in the diner shifted instantly. Conversations died out. The 2 truck drivers at the counter hunched lower over their plates. Jenna looked up, brushing a stray lock of dark hair from her forehead, and saw them. 4 men walked in, wearing suits that cost more than the building itself. In the lead was a man who looked like he had just stepped out of a high-stakes poker game in a private lounge, not a greasy spoon on the edge of the docks. He was tall, with broad shoulders that strained against the fabric of a midnight blue dress shirt. His hair was dark, swept back with precision, and his eyes were the color of cold steel. Adrian Moretti, even Jenna, who did her best to ignore the local gossip columns and the frightened whispers of the city, knew who he was. Everyone in Harborview knew the name. He owned the shipping yards, the high-end clubs, and, if the rumors were true, half the police force. He sat in the back booth, the one with the torn red vinyl seat, looking entirely out of place. His men took the surrounding tables, their eyes scanning the room with practiced paranoia. Jenna took a deep breath, gripped her notepad, and walked over. She needed the tips. She needed tuition money. She could not afford to be intimidated. "Coffee black," Adrian said without looking at her. His voice was a deep baritone, smooth but carrying an edge that made the hair on her arms stand up. Jenna scribbled it down. "Just coffee?" For the first time. He looked up. His gaze was heavy, assessing her in a way that made her feel like a smudge on a pristine window. "Just coffee, and bring it quickly." Jenna turned on her heel, her jaw tight. She hurried behind the counter, poured the steaming black liquid into a thick white mug, and loaded it onto her tray. She was moving fast, her mind already calculating how many more shifts she would need to pick up to cover her textbooks for the semester. As she navigated the narrow aisle back toward the booth, a drunk patron near the front stumbled out of his seat, laughing loudly at a joke only he could hear. He careened backward, his shoulder slamming hard into Jenna's tray. She gasped, trying to correct her balance, but it was too late. The mug tipped. A wave of scalding dark liquid splashed across the table and soaked directly into the front of Adrian Moretti's immaculate shirt. Silence slammed into the room like a physical weight. The drunk man froze. The truck drivers turned around. Adrian's men were on their feet in a second, hands reaching inside their jackets. Adrian did not move. He slowly looked down at the spreading brown stain on his chest, then up at Jenna. His expression was not angry. It was something worse. It was completely void of emotion, cold and terrifyingly calm. "I am so sorry," Jenna stammered, grabbing a handful of napkins and reaching out instinctively to help. "Do not touch me," Adrian said. His voice was low, but it carried across the silent room like a crack of thunder. He stood up, peeling the wet fabric away from his skin. He looked at her with pure disdain, as if she were a clumsy child who had no business being in his presence. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick roll of cash. It was bound in a rubber band, thick enough to choke a horse. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed it onto the table. The heavy thud of the money echoed in the quiet diner. "That is $500, Adrian said, his tone dripping with ice. "Buy yourself a new apron, and while you are at it, go buy some coordination. You clearly do not belong anywhere near civilized people." Jenna stared at the money. $500. That was rent. That was books. That was breathing room. Then she looked at his face. He was sneering at her, expecting her to scramble for the bills, to thank him for his insult. He thought he could humiliate her and then pay for the privilege. Heat rushed up Jenna's neck, burning hotter than the coffee. Her exhaustion vanished, replaced by a spark of pure, white-hot indignation. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly, not with fear, but with rage. She placed her hand over the roll of cash and slid it firmly back across the table toward him. "No," she said. The air in the diner seemed to leave the room. Adrian's right-hand man, a sharp-faced guy named Luca, took a step forward, looking shocked. Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "I said no," Jenna repeated, her voice gaining strength. "It was an accident. I apologized. But I am not a prostitute, and I am not a charity case. I do not take money that is thrown at me like I am for sale. Keep your cash. I do not want it." Adrian stared at her. For a moment he looked genuinely baffled. In his world, money solved everything. Money bought silence, loyalty, and forgiveness. Nobody refused him, especially not a waitress with dark circles under her eyes and scuffed sneakers. "You are making a mistake," Adrian said softly. "The only mistake I made was spilling the coffee," Jenna shot back. She turned her back on him. She grabbed a to-go box from the counter, walked back to the table where he had left the money he refused to pick up, and swept the entire roll of bills into the box. She marched to the front counter and shoved the money into the plastic tip jar labeled Staff Fund. "That is for the night crew," she announced, her voice ringing out. "Since you are so generous—" She went back to the kitchen, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Adrian stood there for a long moment, staring at the kitchen door. The insult stung, but underneath the irritation, something else flickered: curiosity. "Let's go," he muttered. He walked out, his men falling in line behind him. As he reached the glass door, he paused. Outside, near the edge of the parking lot, he saw Jenna again. She had slipped out the back for a breath of air. She was standing next to the teenage busboy, a kid named Leo, who looked like he was about to have a panic attack. Adrian watched from the shadows. He saw Jenna reach into her own pocket, her apron pocket, where he knew she kept her meager tips, and pull out a crumpled $20 bill. She pressed it into the kid's hand and pointed toward a waiting taxi. She said something soft, patted the boy on the shoulder, and watched him get into the cab. She had just refused $500, yet she was giving away her own money to a kid who looked frightened. Adrian frowned. It was an act of softness that irritated him. It was illogical. It was weak. And yet, the image of her defiant face in the diner stuck in his mind like a splinter he could not remove. "Luca," Adrian said, not looking away from Jenna as she walked back inside. "Boss, the diner is off limits," Adrian said. "Tell the crew. No shakedowns, no collections. Nobody bothers this place." Luca looked surprised, but nodded. "Got it." 3 days later, the afternoon sun beat down on the pavement of Harborview. Jenna was walking to her shift, her backpack heavy with textbooks. She was tired, her feet dragging, her mind occupied with an upcoming exam on social welfare policies. She was crossing the street near the diner when a sleek black sedan whipped around the corner, accelerating fast to beat the yellow light. A cyclist in the bike lane swerved to avoid a pothole, and the black car jerked hard to the left, tires screeching. The fender missed the cyclist by inches. The cyclist shouted and wobbled, terrified, before pedaling away frantically. The car slammed to a halt. Jenna saw red, the arrogance of it, the reckless disregard for safety. Snapped something inside her. She marched up to the black sedan and slammed her palm down on the hood. "Hey!" she yelled at the tinted glass. "Watch where you are going! You nearly killed him!" The driver's door opened. Adrian Moretti stepped out. He was wearing sunglasses and a charcoal gray suit, looking every bit the king of the city. He took off his glasses, his eyes widening slightly when he saw who was screaming at his car. "You," he said flatly. "Of course it is you. Do you have a death wish, or do you just enjoy throwing tantrums in traffic?" Jenna did not back down, even though he towered over her. "You drive like a maniac," she snapped. "You think because you have an expensive car, you own the road. That kid could have been hurt." Adrian leaned against the car, crossing his arms. He looked her up and down, taking in her worn jeans and the oversized university hoodie she wore. "The kid swerved into my lane," Adrian said calmly. I avoided him. That is called driving. Something you might learn if you ever get behind the wheel of something that costs more than a bicycle. Jenna stepped closer, invading his personal space. Her anger was a shield, but beneath it, she felt a strange, vibrating tension. He smelled of expensive cologne and leather. "You are insufferable," she said, her voice shaking with adrenaline. "And you are loud," he countered. His voice dropped an octave, becoming dangerously smooth. "Go to work, Jenna. Before you get into trouble, you cannot talk your way out of—" He knew her name. The realization made her breath hitch. She stared at him, her lips parted, caught between fear and a confusing, magnetic pull. He was looking at her mouth, his gaze lingering for a fraction of a second too long. Then he turned, got back in the car, and drove away without looking back. Harbor University was a sanctuary of brick and ivy, a world away from the gritty streets of the docks. But the darkness of the city seeped in there too. Jenna sat in the back of her sociology lecture, trying to focus on the professor's voice, but the whispers of the girls in the row ahead of her drifted back. "Did you hear about Veludo?" one girl whispered. "My brother says the police are going to raid it soon. They say Adrian Moretti is washing money through the VIP lounge." "He is so scary," the other girl replied with a giggle that made Jenna's stomach turn. "But you have to admit, he is gorgeous, in a terrifying way." Jenna gripped her pen tighter. She looked out the window. She knew that face. She knew the coldness in those eyes. The idea that people found his violence romantic made her feel sick. He was a predator. He was everything wrong with Harborview. He was the reason neighborhoods like hers were crumbling while downtown glistened with dirty money. She felt a disturbing curiosity mixed with her disgust. She wondered what it must be like to live in a world where you answered to no one. She pushed the thought away, disgusted with herself. That night, the fog rolled in off the harbor, thick and smelling of salt and diesel. Jenna was closing up the diner alone. The cook had left 20 minutes ago, and she was just taking out the final bag of trash to the dumpster in the back alley. The alley was dim, lit only by a single flickering security bulb that cast long, dancing shadows against the brick walls. Jenna heaved the heavy black bag into the dumpster, wiping her hands on her apron. A groan echoed from the darkness behind the stack of old pallets. Jenna froze. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling. There was a scuffling sound, the scrape of a boot on concrete. A man stumbled out from the shadows. He was young, maybe mid-20s, wearing a dark leather jacket. He was clutching his shoulder, and dark blood was seeping through his fingers, dripping onto the dirty ground. "Help," he wheezed. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Jenna's social worker training kicked in over her fear. She rushed forward as the man's knees gave out. She caught him, struggling under his weight, and helped him sit against the wall. "Oh my God, you are shot," she said, seeing the tear in his jacket. "I am calling 911. "No." The man grabbed her arm with surprising strength. His eyes were wide with panic. "No cops, please. No cops. You are bleeding out," Jenna argued, reaching for her phone. Tires screeched at the mouth of the alley. High beams cut through the fog, blinding her. A car door slammed. Jenna shielded her eyes. A figure strode toward them, moving with lethal purpose. Adrian. He stopped 5 feet away, looking from the bleeding man to Jenna. His expression was thunderous. "Get away from him," Adrian commanded. Jenna stood her ground, placing herself between Adrian and the wounded man. "He needs a hospital," she said. "He has been shot. I know he's been shot." Adrian snapped. He stepped closer, the shadows making him look enormous. "And he is not going to a hospital. A hospital means a police report. A police report means questions I do not want to answer. He's going to die if you do not get him help," Jenna yelled. Adrian moved so fast she didn't see it coming. He closed the distance between them and gripped her wrist. It wasn't painful, but his grip was ironclad, immovable. He pulled her slightly aside, forcing her to look up at him. They were inches apart in the dim light. She could see the flecks of gray in his steel eyes, the tension in his jaw. "Listen to me," he hissed. "This is not your world. You walk away right now. You go back inside and you forget you saw anything. Do you understand? Jenna's heart was pounding so hard she thought he could surely feel it through her pulse point under his fingers. He was dangerous. She knew that, but she looked at the boy bleeding on the ground. He was not much older than the busboy she had helped. "I am not afraid of you," she whispered. Adrian stared at her. He searched her face, looking for the tremor, the flinch. He saw the fear in her eyes, yes, but beneath it, he saw a stubborn, reckless courage that stunned him. She was terrified, but she was standing her ground against the most dangerous man in the city because she wanted to save a stranger. Adrian released her wrist abruptly. "Fix him," he said, his voice rough. "What? You want to help? Help him. We have a first aid kit in the car. Stabilize him." Jenna didn't waste a second. She ran to the black car, grabbed the kit from the back seat, and knelt beside the wounded man. Adrian stood over them, watching as she worked. Her hands were steady despite her fear. She cut away the shirt, packed the wound with gauze, and applied pressure until the bleeding slowed. "Okay," she said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "He needs a surgeon, but that will hold him for a transport. You have to take him somewhere safe. Now." Adrian nodded to his driver, who hurried out to help lift the wounded man into the back seat. When the man was loaded, Adrian turned back to Jenna. She was standing there, her apron stained with the blood of his soldier. She looked exhausted, fragile, and incredibly beautiful in the stark alley light. Adrian reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a thick white envelope. He didn't toss it this time. He held it out to her. "Take it," he said. "It is compensation for your silence and for the ruined apron." Jenna looked at the envelope. She knew there was thousands of dollars in there, enough to pay her tuition, enough to fix her problems. She looked up at Adrian. His face was unreadable, but his hand was steady. She reached out and took the envelope. Adrian felt a strange sensation in his chest. Relief, perhaps, or disappointment that she was just like everyone else after all. Jenna turned and placed the envelope gently on the lid of the dumpster next to them. "I didn't do it for you," she said quietly. She turned and walked back toward the rear door of the diner, her spine straight, her head high. Adrian watched her go. The envelope sat white and stark against the dirty metal of the dumpster. She had refused him again. She had touched his soldier's blood, saved a life, and walked away from a fortune without blinking. He despised her for it. He despised her for making him feel small, for making his power look useless. But as he got back into the car, glancing one last time at the door she had disappeared through, he felt a dangerous heat uncoiling in his gut. It was an obsession taking root. He hated her defiance. But God, he wanted to break it. He wanted to know if she would burn as bright as she fought. "Drive," he ordered. The car slipped away into the night, leaving the money behind in the alley, untouched. The sprawling skyline of Harborview glittered like a spilled chest of diamonds against the velvet black of the night. But Adrian Moretti was not looking at the view. He stood in the center of his penthouse living room, a space of cold marble and Italian leather, staring intently at a tablet screen propped up on his glass coffee table. On the screen, a grainy black and white video looped on repeat. It was footage from the security camera mounted above the entrance of the Harbor 24 diner. In the video, a woman in a stained apron stood in an alleyway, her posture rigid, her chin lifted in defiance. She placed a white envelope on a dumpster lid and walked away. Adrian watched it again. She walked away. She did not hesitate. She did not look back. Luca, his second in command, walked into the room carrying 2 tumblers of amber whiskey. He set one down near Adrian's hand and leaned over the sofa, glancing at the screen. "You are going to burn a hole in that tablet, boss," Luca said, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "That is the 20th time you have watched it in the last hour. You are obsessing over a waitress." Adrian swiped the screen dark, the movement sharp and irritated. "I am not obsessing," he snapped. "I am analyzing a security breach. She knows too much. She saw Marco bleeding. She knows my face, and she refused the payout. That makes her a liability. A liability who saved Marco's life, Luca pointed out. Taking a sip of his drink, most civilians would have called the cops the second they saw blood. She patched him up. She has got guts. Maybe you just do not like that you could not buy her. Adrian turned his cold gaze on Luca. Do not mistake curiosity for weakness. Luca, people who cannot be bought are dangerous because they are unpredictable. I need to know if she is going to talk. I need to know who she is. She is nobody, Luca said with a shrug. A grad student drowning in debt, works double shifts, volunteers at a crisis line. Squeaky clean. Nobody is squeaky clean, Adrian muttered, walking toward the floor-to-ceiling window. Keep eyes on her. If she sneezes, I want to know about it. For Jenna. The following week felt like living in a fishbowl. The exhaustion of her double shifts was now compounded by a creeping sensation of paranoia that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up constantly. It started with small things. A black SUV with tinted windows was parked across the street from the diner every single night when she arrived for her shift, and it was still there when she left at dawn. Then there were the customers. Men she had never seen before, burly, silent types who wore jackets that seemed too tight across the shoulders, started occupying the corner booths. They ordered black coffee, nursed it for hours, and watched the door. They watched her. On Thursday night, Jenna finally snapped. She grabbed the coffee pot and marched over to table 6, where a man with a thick scar through his eyebrow had been staring at her for 40 minutes. "Refill?" she asked, her voice tight. The man looked up. "No, I am good." Jenna slammed the pot down on the table, coffee sloshing over the rim. "Who are you?" she demanded in a harsh whisper. "Why are you watching me?" The man did not flinch. He looked calm, almost bored. "Boss just wants to make sure you are safe." "Miss Morales." Jenna felt a flush of heat rise from her chest to her face. It was equal parts fury and a strange, unsettling flutter in her stomach. Safe. As if she were a possession to be guarded. "Tell your boss I do not need a babysitter," she hissed. "And tell him if you do not order food, I am kicking you out. This is a business, not a security checkpoint." The man just smirked and ordered a slice of pie. The surveillance was annoying, but the real fear arrived 2 days later. It was early evening, the diner lull before the dinner rush, when the door opened and 2 men in cheap, ill-fitting suits walked in. They did not look like Adrian's men. They lacked the polish, the predatory grace. They looked like bureaucracy and bad intentions. One of them flashed a badge. "Federal agents, we are looking for Jenna Morales." Jenna froze behind the counter, her hand gripping the edge of the laminate. "That is me." They sat at the counter. The older one, Agent Miller, had eyes that looked like they had seen too many lies. "We have reports of a disturbance in the alley behind this establishment last Tuesday night," Miller said. "A gunshot victim, a black sedan, a witness fitting your description." Jenna's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She wiped her damp palms on her apron. This was it. This was the moment she could get out. All she had to do was tell them. Yes, it was Adrian Moretti. Yes, I saw his soldier. Yes, he was here. But as she opened her mouth, she thought of the way Adrian had looked at her in the alley, the intensity of his warning. And strangely, she thought of the man bleeding on the ground, the desperate fear in his eyes when he begged her not to call the police. If she talked, that man would go to prison. Adrian would go to prison, and she would be the reason. "I do not know what you're talking about," Jenna said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her knees. "I work the night shift. There are always strange noises in the alley. Cats, drunks. I did not see any car." Miller stared at her. He leaned in closer. "Miss Morales, obstructing a federal investigation is a felony. We know Moretti operates in this area. If he threatened you—" "Nobody threatened me," Jenna interrupted. Meeting his gaze, "I took out the trash. I saw a couple of stray dogs fighting over scraps, and I came back inside. That is it." The agents held her gaze for a long, agonizing minute. Finally, Miller sighed and stood up. He placed a business card on the counter. "If you remember anything about those dogs, you give me a call." Jenna waited until they were gone before she let out the breath she had been holding. She leaned against the soda machine, her legs shaking so hard she thought she might fall. She hated Adrian Moretti. She despised everything he stood for. And yet, she had just lied to the FBI to protect him. The diner was empty. The neon sign in the window buzzed with a dying flicker. Jenna was wiping down the counter, the smell of bleach sharp in her nose. When the bell chimed, she did not need to look up to know who it was. The air in the room changed instantly, charged with a heavy, magnetic pressure. Adrian stood in the doorway. He was alone tonight. No entourage, no guards. He wore a long charcoal coat, his hands buried in the pockets, his collar turned up against the wind. He looked tired. The shadows under his eyes made the sharp angles of his face look even more severe. "We are closed," Jenna said. "Not stopping or scrubbing." "I know," Adrian replied. His voice was low, rolling through the empty space. He walked to the counter and stood directly across from her. He watched her hand move in circles on the laminate. "My men told me the feds were here," he said. Jenna stopped scrubbing. She looked up at him. "They were... and? I told them I saw stray dogs," she said flatly. Adrian let out a breath, his shoulders dropping a fraction of an inch. Silence stretched between them, thick and complicated. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I did not do it for you," Jenna snapped, the anger she had been suppressing all week bubbling to the surface. "I did it because I am not a rat, and because I do not trust them any more than I trust you. So do not think you owe me anything." Adrian reached into his inner coat pocket. Jenna tensed, but he only pulled out another envelope, thinner this time, but still substantial. He slid it across the freshly cleaned counter. "It is not about owing," Adrian said. "It is about reality. You took a risk. You are working 3 jobs. Jenna, you are exhausted. I can see it in your face. Take the money. Quit this place. Focus on your school." Jenna looked at the envelope with disdain. "You just cannot help yourself, can you? You think because you have power, you can just pave over people's lives with cash. I am trying to make your life easier," Adrian said, his voice rising slightly. "You are stubborn. It is irritating. You are drowning in work, and you are too proud to grab a lifeline. It is not pride." Jenna threw the rag into the bucket of water. It splashed loudly. "It is dignity. Something you probably would not understand. You think you can buy silence. You think you can buy gratitude? I am not one of your employees. Adrian, I am not someone you can pay off to feel better about the fact that you are a criminal." Adrian's eyes darkened. He leaned over the counter, invading her space. His face was inches from hers. "You think you are so righteous," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You judge me from your high horse, but you live in the same city I do. You benefit from the order I keep. You lied to the FBI today because deep down, you know the law does not protect people like us. I do." "People like us?" Jenna let out a bitter laugh. "There is no us. There is you, breaking the world, and me, trying to fix the pieces you leave behind." They were glaring at each other now, breathing hard. The anger was palpable, but beneath it, the current of attraction was undeniable. It crackled in the air like static electricity. Adrian's gaze dropped from her furious eyes to her mouth. Jenna saw it. Her breath hitched in her throat. Her heart slammed against her ribs. For a second, neither of them moved. The diner was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. Then, the world exploded. A deafening crack shattered the stillness. The large plate glass window at the front of the diner disintegrated, showering the booths in shards of glistening debris. Jenna didn't have time to scream. Adrian moved before her brain could even register the sound of the gunshot. He vaulted over the counter with terrifying speed. He did not say a word. He slammed into her, his arms wrapping around her waist, and tackled her to the floor. They hit the linoleum hard behind the shelter of the overturned counter. Adrian landed on top of her, his heavy body covering hers completely. He pressed her head down, shielding her with his shoulders and back. More shots rang out. Pop, 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 tearing into the diner's facade, ripping through the leather booths, shattering the pie display case. Glass rained down on them like deadly confetti. Jenna squeezed her eyes shut, her hands instinctively clutching the lapels of Adrian's coat. She could feel the heat of his body seeping into hers. He was heavy Solid, a wall of muscle between her and the bullets. His cheek was pressed against her temple. She could hear his breath, hot, fast, and controlled, right against her ear. "Stay down," he commanded. His voice a rough vibration against her skin. "Do not move." The shooting lasted only 10 seconds, but it felt like hours. Then, the screech of tires peeling away echoed from the street, fading into the distance. Silence returned, but it was a ringing, terrified silence. Adrian did not move immediately. He stayed over her, his muscles taut as steel wire. He was waiting, listening. Jenna lay beneath him, her chest heaving. She could feel the rapid, powerful thud of his heart beating against her own chest. He had thrown himself in front of the glass. He had covered her. Slowly. Adrian lifted his head. He looked down at her. His hair was dusted with powdered glass. His eyes were wide, the pupils blown, scanning her face with an intensity that made her shiver. "Are you hit?" he demanded. Jenna shook her head, unable to find her voice. "No, I do not think so." Their faces were so close, their noses almost brushed. In the wreckage of the diner, with the smell of gunpowder and spilled coffee in the air, the moment stretched. Jenna became acutely aware of the weight of his hips pressing into hers, the protective cage of his arms. The fear in her system was transmuting into something else: adrenaline, relief, and a desperate, confusing desire. In the distance, the wail of police sirens began to rise. The spell broke. Adrian pushed himself up to his knees, then reached down and pulled Jenna up. His hands were surprisingly gentle as he brushed shards of glass from her shoulders and hair. He checked her arms, her face, his touch clinical but lingering. "You are bleeding," he noted, his thumb brushing a tiny scratch on her cheek. "It is just glass," Jenna whispered. Adrian's jaw clenched. He looked at the shattered window, then back at her. His expression hardened, the vulnerability of the moment locking away behind his usual mask of command. "This was not random," he said coldly. "That was a message. A drive-by does not target an empty diner unless they know who is inside." He pulled out his phone and hit a speed dial button. "Luca, get the car. Bring the cleanup crew. We have a situation at the diner." He hung up and looked at Jenna. "You cannot stay here. You are in the crossfire now. If they know I come here, they know you are the weak link. They will come back." "I am not going anywhere with you," Jenna protested, though her voice lacked its usual fire. "I have to wait for the police. I have to explain." "You will explain nothing," Adrian interrupted. "You will disappear for a few days until I handle this. If you stay here, you are dead. Look." He pointed to the wall behind the counter, right where Jenna had been standing minutes ago. 3 bullet holes marred the plaster, perfectly centered at chest height. Jenna stared at the holes. If he hadn't tackled her, if he hadn't moved that fast, she would be dead. The reality of it crashed into her, making her knees buckle. Adrian caught her arm to steady her. "I am not asking. Jenna, you are coming with me." 40 minutes later, Jenna was standing in the kitchen of an apartment she had never seen before. It was in a nondescript brick building on the edge of the city, the kind of place that looked abandoned but was likely fortified like a bunker. The apartment was sparse: a couch, a table, a bed. No photos, no personal touches. It was a safe house, a place where people existed but did not live. Jenna paced the small kitchen, her arms wrapped around herself. She was still wearing her uniform, now dusted with drywall and glass. Adrian was leaning against the counter, watching her. He had shed his coat, revealing a shoulder holster that he made no attempt to hide. "This is kidnapping," Jenna muttered, turning to face him. "It is protective custody," Adrian corrected. "Without the badge, I have a life. Adrian, I have classes tomorrow. I have a shift at the library. I cannot just vanish into your underworld because some rival gang decided to use me for target practice." "You do not have a life if you are in a morgue," Adrian shouted back. His composure cracked, revealing the raw fear underneath. "Do you not understand how close that was? They missed you by inches. Inches, Jenna." He stepped away from the counter and stalked toward her. Jenna backed up until her hips hit the edge of the kitchen island. She had nowhere else to go. Adrian stopped right in front of her, planting one hand on the countertop beside her hip, effectively boxing her in. His breathing was ragged. "You are a civilian. You are not built for this. Being near me means risk. I told you that. I told you to stay away. Then why are you here?" Jenna whispered, her chin tilting up to meet his gaze. "Why did you come back tonight? Why did you save me?" Adrian stared at her. His eyes dropped to her lips again. And this time, he didn't look away. The air in the small kitchen grew heavy, suffocatingly hot. The memory of his body pressed against hers on the diner floor came rushing back to both of them. "Because I could not let them take you," he murmured, his voice rough with an emotion he refused to name. Jenna's pulse raced in her neck. She felt the warmth of his hand near her hip, the heat radiating from his chest. She knew she should push him away. She knew he was dangerous, a criminal, everything she hated. But in that moment, she didn't want him to leave. "I am already in too deep," she whispered. Adrian's gaze darkened. He leaned in closer, his head lowered, his mouth hovering just an inch from hers. Jenna's eyes fluttered shut. She could feel his breath on her lips, taste the promise of the kiss. It was right there, the surrender, the collision. Then Adrian stiffened. He pulled back abruptly, his jaw clenching so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. He pushed himself away from the counter, putting distance between them as if she were made of fire. "Lock the door," he said, his voice flat and cold again. "Do not open it for anyone but me or Luca." He turned and walked out of the apartment. Jenna stood alone in the kitchen, her lips still tingling from a kiss that never happened, listening to the heavy click of the deadbolt sliding into place. She was safe, but she had never felt more in danger. The apartment on the 24th floor was less of a home and more of a gilded cage. It was sleek, modern, and completely devoid of soul. For 3 days, Jenna Morales had lived within its gray walls, watching the city of Harborview from behind reinforced glass. Her life had shrunk to a series of escorted movements. When she went to her classes at the university, 2 men in dark suits walked 10 paces behind her. When she went to the volunteer center to answer crisis calls, they waited in the lobby, drinking stale coffee and watching the door. She felt the weight of their presence like a physical shackle. She was safe, yes, but she was also trapped, and the guilt of it gnawed at her. She knew this protection cost money, time, and focus, resources Adrian Moretti usually spent on things far more sinister than a stubborn grad student. On Thursday morning, the elevator ride down to the garage was thick with tension. Jenna stood in the corner, clutching her backpack straps. Luca, Adrian's right-hand man, stood near the doors, his phone pressed to his ear. "We have a problem with the shipment in the East District," Luca said, his voice low and clipped. "The Keller crew is pushing boundaries. They are getting bold." Jenna stiffened. She knew that name. The Kellers were a rival faction, brutal and messy, the kind of criminals who didn't care about collateral damage. Luca listened for a moment, his face darkening. "Yeah, I know. They are targeting anyone close to the organization. They drove past the diner again last night. Smashed the rest of the windows." Jenna's stomach dropped. The diner. Her friends. The place that had given her a job when no one else would. She felt a surge of nausea. It was because of her. The war had come to her doorstep, and now innocent people were sweeping up glass because she had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Luca hung up and glanced at her, catching the look of horror on her face. He didn't say anything to comfort her. He just turned back to the doors as they slid open. "Take me to him," Jenna said, her voice shaking but firm. Luca raised an eyebrow. "You have a sociology exam in an hour." "I do not care about the exam," Jenna snapped. "Take me to Adrian, now." The nightclub, Veludo, was a fortress of velvet and shadow during the daylight hours. It was located in the basement of a historic theater, a labyrinth of dark corridors and plush VIP booths. When Jenna walked in, the main floor was empty. The chairs were overturned on the tables, and the smell of stale alcohol and expensive perfume lingered in the air. Adrian was in his private office at the back of the club. The room was soundproofed, lined with dark mahogany bookshelves and heavy drapes. He was sitting behind a massive desk, reviewing a stack of documents, a glass of water untouched beside him. He looked exhausted. The lines around his eyes were deeper than she remembered, and he had discarded his suit jacket. His white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. He looked up when Luca opened the door. He didn't look surprised. "Leave us," Adrian said. Luca nodded and closed the door, leaving them alone in the oppressive silence of the office. Jenna didn't waste time. They smashed the windows at the diner. Adrian leaned back in his chair. "Studying her. I know. No one was hurt. I have already sent a crew to board it up and pay the owner for the damages. That is not the point." Jenna threw her backpack onto a leather armchair. "You said I would be safe." "You did not say you would turn my entire life into a target practice zone for your rivals. I told you to stay away," Adrian replied calmly, though his eyes flashed. "I told you that being near me was dangerous. You are the one who insisted on saving Marco. You are the one who refused to walk away when I gave you the chance." Jenna paced the room, her hands trembling. "So this is my fault? Is that what you are saying?" Adrian stood up. His movement was sudden, fluid and intimidating. He walked around the desk and stopped in front of her. "No," he said, "it is not your fault, but it is your reality. And you need to understand exactly what you are caught in the middle of." He turned toward the wall behind his desk. He reached for a framed black and white photograph of the Harborview coastline and swung it aside. Behind it was a steel panel. Adrian punched a code into the keypad. There was a heavy mechanical click, and a hidden safe door popped open. Jenna watched, her breath catching in her throat. Adrian reached inside and pulled out 2 items, a thick, leather-bound ledger and a small, silver-encrypted hard drive. He tossed them onto the desk. They landed with a heavy thud. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. Jenna shook her head. "This is the lifeblood of half the city," Adrian said. "The ledger contains the names of every payout I have made in the last 10 years. Judges, city councilmen, police captains. The drive contains the routing numbers for offshore accounts that hold leverage over the most powerful families in the state." Jenna stared at the items. She realized, with a cold jolt, that she was looking at evidence that could topple the entire government of Harborview. "The shooting at the diner was not about you, Jenna," Adrian continued, his voice low and intense. "It was about this. The Keller crew knows I have it. They know I'm squeezing them out of the port. They want the keys to the kingdom, and they think kidnapping someone close to me will make me trade it." Jenna looked up at him. "Why are you telling me this?" Adrian's expression softened. "Just for a fraction of a second, because you are smart, and because you are stubborn. If I just tell you to hide, you will fight me. If I tell you to run, you will dig your heels in. I need you to see the stakes. I need you to understand that these people do not just want to hurt you. They want to use you to burn this city to the ground." Jenna felt a chill run down her spine. "You are trusting me with this? You are showing me the thing that could put you in prison for life?" Adrian looked at her, his steel gray eyes searching hers. "You already held my fate in your hands that night in the alley. You did not turn me in then. I am betting everything that you will not turn me in now." It was a terrifying admission. He was tying her to him, binding her to his secrets with a knot that couldn't be untied. "I never asked for this," Jenna whispered. "I just wanted to finish my degree. I just wanted to pay my rent." "I know," Adrian said, stepping closer. He reached out, his hand hovering near her arm but not touching. "I know you did not ask for it, but here we are." Before Jenna could respond, the room plunged into darkness. The overhead lights cut out instantly, followed by the hum of the ventilation system dying down. A second later, the emergency lights kicked in, bathing the office in a dim, blood-red glow. Jenna gasped. "What? Get down!" Adrian hissed. He moved with terrifying speed. He didn't go for the desk. He went for her. He grabbed her arm and pulled her away from the center of the room just as a heavy thud echoed from the main club floor outside. Someone was breaching the back entrance. Adrian pulled a handgun from a holster at the small of his back, a movement so practiced it looked like muscle memory. He dragged Jenna toward a panel in the wainscoting near the bookshelf. He kicked it, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow, concrete stairwell. "Inside," he ordered. He shoved her into the darkness of the hidden passage and followed her in. Pulling the panel shut behind them, the lock clicked into place, sealing them in the cramped space. It was pitch black, save for the thin line of red light seeping under the door. The space was tiny, barely enough room for 2 people. Adrian pressed Jenna against the rough concrete wall, his body shielding hers. They froze, listening. Heavy footsteps echoed on the floorboards of the office they had just left. Voices, rough, shouting commands, filtered through the wall. "Clear the room! Find the safe!" Jenna's heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it might crack the bone. She was trembling. Adrian's body was pressed tight against hers, a wall of heat and tension. His left arm was braced against the wall by her head, caging her in, while his right hand held the gun pointed at the door, ready to fire. He leaned in close, his lips brushing her ear. "Quiet," he breathed. "Do not make a sound." Jenna nodded, though he couldn't see her. She could smell him, the scent of cedar, expensive soap, and the metallic tang of the gun. She could feel the rapid rise and fall of his chest against hers. The intimacy of it was overwhelming. In the terrifying dark, her senses were heightened to a painful degree. Every point of contact between their bodies felt electric. A muffled gunshot rang out from the main club floor, followed by the sound of shattering glass. Jenna flinched violently. Her hands flew up instinctively, clutching the lapels of his shirt, burying her face in his chest to stifle a cry. Adrian reacted instantly. He shifted his weight, pressing her harder against the wall, covering her completely. His hand moved from the wall to the back of her head, holding her still, protecting her. "I have got you," he whispered, his voice a vibration against her temple. "I have got you." The chaos outside seemed to last for hours, though it was likely only minutes. There was more shouting, another burst of gunfire, and then the sound of running footsteps fading away. Adrian's security team had arrived. Adrian didn't move immediately. He stayed there, pressed against her in the dark stairwell, waiting. Jenna didn't let go of his shirt. She was shaking, the adrenaline crash leaving her weak. "Clear," a voice shouted from the office. It was Luca. "Boss?" Adrian let out a long exhale. He stepped back, giving Jenna room to breathe, though the loss of his heat made her shiver. "Stay behind me," he said. He opened the panel. The office was bathed in the harsh white light of flashlights. Chairs were overturned. The painting hiding the safe had been slashed. Glass from a broken vase covered the floor. Jenna stepped out, her legs wobbling. She looked at the destruction, then at Adrian. He was holstering his weapon, his face a mask of cold fury as he surveyed the damage, but his hands were shaking slightly. He turned to her. "Are you hurt?" Jenna looked down at herself. She was fine. "Just scared. No, I am—" She stopped. Adrian reached out and cupped the side of her face. His thumb brushed her hairline, coming away with a smear of red. "You cut yourself on the wall," he said quietly. The gentleness of the touch, so at odds with the violence of the last 10 minutes, so at odds with the gun on his hip, broke something inside Jenna. The dam holding back her fear and her confusion shattered. She grabbed his wrist, her fingers digging into his skin. "Why do you do this?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "Why do you keep risking your life? You could have left me in the safe house. You could have let them take the safe. Why are you standing here bleeding for secrets and protecting me like I matter more than your empire?" Adrian stared at her. The emergency lights were still flickering, casting shadows across his face. He looked at her mouth, then up to her eyes. "I do not know," he admitted, his voice a rough whisper. "I do not know how to walk away from you. You refuse to run from me, Jenna, and now I cannot seem to run from you." The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a tension that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with the man standing in front of her. He was a criminal. He was dangerous. He was everything she should run from. But he was also the man who had covered her body with his own while bullets flew. He was the man looking at her as if she were the only clean thing in a dirty world. Jenna didn't think. She rose on her toes and kissed him. It wasn't a tentative kiss. It was fierce, desperate, born of fear and adrenaline and a sudden, overwhelming need to prove they were both still alive. Adrian made a low, startled sound in his throat. For a heartbeat, he froze. Then he broke. His hand slid from her face to the small of her back, pulling her flush against him. His other hand tangled in her hair, gripping tight, angling her head as he deepened the kiss. It was consuming. Jenna let out a shaky breath against his mouth, her hands sliding up his chest to wrap around his neck. They stumbled backward, their coordination lost to the heat of the moment. Jenna's hips bumped against the edge of the heavy mahogany desk. Adrian didn't stop. He pressed her back against the wood, stepping between her legs, his body a solid weight that grounded her. His mouth moved against hers with a hunger that stole her breath. It was rough, demanding, but underneath it was that same terrifying vulnerability he had shown in the stairwell. He tasted like scotch and danger. Jenna's hands explored the lines of muscle in his shoulders, feeling the tension radiating off him. She tugged at the collar of his shirt, needing to feel skin, needing to be closer. Adrian pulled back, just an inch, his breathing ragged, his forehead rested against hers, his eyes dark and blown wide as he searched her face. He was waiting, asking. Even in the chaos, even with the adrenaline roaring in his veins, he would not take what she did not give. Jenna nodded. A small, breathless movement, yes. Adrian groaned, a low sound of surrender, and captured her lips again. His hands roamed over the curve of her waist, up her spine, splayed wide against her back as if he were trying to memorize the shape of her. Jenna melted into him, her fingers sliding into the hair at the nape of his neck. They stood there in the wreckage of his office, surrounded by broken glass and secrets, lost in each other. The kiss slowed, turning from frantic desperation to a slow, deep burn. Adrian kissed the corner of her mouth, her jaw, the sensitive spot beneath her ear, making her shiver. Jenna laughed, a sudden, shaky sound that bubbled up from her chest. Adrian pulled back, his hands still resting on her waist. "What?" he murmured, his voice husky. "We are insane," Jenna whispered, resting her forehead against his chest. "Someone just tried to kill us, and we are alive," Adrian finished. He rested his chin on the top of her head, his arms tightening around her. "We are very alive." Jenna closed her eyes, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart. For the first time since this nightmare began, she didn't feel trapped. She felt found, but as the adrenaline faded, the reality of the situation began to creep back in. She looked at the open safe, at the ledger on the desk. She looked at the gun on Adrian's hip. "This doesn't change anything, does it?" she asked softly. "The Kellers are still coming. The feds are still watching." Adrian pulled away enough to look at her. He brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering. "No," he said. "It changes everything, because now I have something to lose." Jenna looked at him, realizing the terrified truth of his words. She had refused his money. She had refused his protection. But she hadn't been able to refuse him. And now, in the middle of a war, that might be the most dangerous thing of all. "Come on," Adrian said, his voice returning to its usual command, though his hand remained on her lower back, warm and possessive. "We need to move. This place is compromised." He led her toward the door, stepping over the shattered glass. Jenna followed, her hand slipping into his. He squeezed her fingers tight, and they walked out of the darkness together. The morning sun that filtered through the heavy velvet curtains of Adrian Moretti's penthouse did not bring warmth. It brought clarity, and clarity was cruel. The adrenaline of the night before, the gunfire, the hidden stairwell, the desperate, consuming kiss in the wreckage of his office had evaporated, leaving behind a stark reality that settled over the room like a layer of frost. Jenna had woken up in the guest suite, alone. When she walked into the kitchen, expecting perhaps a conversation or at least a shared acknowledgement of what had happened, she found Adrian on the phone, his back turned to her. He was wearing a fresh suit, armor in place. His voice clipped and professional as he barked orders about security protocols and damage control. He acknowledged her with a curt nod, pointing to a pot of coffee before turning back to the window. There was no softness in his eyes. The man who had held her face with trembling hands in the dark was gone, replaced by the crime boss who viewed emotions as structural weaknesses. Jenna drank her coffee quickly. Feeling a hot flush of embarrassment rise up her neck, she felt foolish. She had let herself be vulnerable, had let herself believe that the connection between them was a bridge, only to find that Adrian had burned it down the moment the sun came up. She left for campus without a goodbye. Throughout the day, their communication was reduced to digital crumbs. A text from him at noon. Security detail is outside the library. Do not wander. A reply from her at 2. I am fine. A final message from him at 4. Stay safe. The words were cold, functional, and devoid of the heat that had fused them together just hours prior. Jenna sat on a concrete bench in the university quad, staring at her phone. Around her, students laughed and complained about midterms, their problems feeling light years away from the heavy dread settling in her stomach. Miss Morales? The voice was sharp, professional. Jenna looked up to see a woman standing over her. She was wearing a beige trench coat and sensible heels, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She didn't look like a threat, but the way she held herself suggested she was used to being obeyed. Jenna sat up straighter. Yes, Agent Rachel Ward, FBI. Jenna's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't run. She stayed frozen as the woman sat down on the other end of the bench, placing a leather bag between them. I am not here to arrest you, Jenna, Ward said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial volume. I am here to warn you. I have nothing to say to you, Jenna replied, gripping her phone. Ward sighed, looking out across the lawn. You are a smart girl. Dean's List, volunteer work. You have a bright future. But right now, you are standing in the middle of a blast radius. Adrian Moretti is going down. It is not a matter of if, but when. Jenna remained silent, her jaw set. We know you have been escorted by his men, Ward continued. We know about the diner. We know you were at Veludo last night. Listen to me carefully. When a man like Moretti falls, the building does not just collapse, it crushes everyone standing near the foundation. That includes you. Jenna stood up to leave, but Ward's next words stopped her. We have a source inside. Jenna, someone high up in his organization is already feeding us information. It is only a matter of time before we get the location of his financial records. When that happens, the RICO charges drop. If you are with him when the hammer falls, you go to prison, or worse. His rivals get to you first. Jenna turned back, her face pale. Help us, Ward said, sliding a card across the bench. We can put you in witness protection. New name, new city, clean slate. You do not have to go down for a man who views you as a liability. Jenna stared at the card. The white rectangle looked like a life raft, but stepping onto it meant drowning Adrian. I have to go to class, Jenna said, her voice shaking. She walked away, leaving the card on the bench, but the seed of doubt had been planted deep in her chest. 2 hours later, Jenna stormed into Adrian's penthouse. The elevator doors opened directly into the living room, and she found him standing over a table covered in blueprints and burner phones. The air in the room was stale, thick with tension. Adrian looked up, his expression hardening when he saw the look on her face. I told you to go straight to the safe house, he said, his voice grating. I met an FBI agent today. Jenna blurted out. The room went dead silent. Adrian dropped the pen he was holding. It hit the table with a sharp crack. He walked around the table, his movements slow and predatory. What did you just say? Her name is Rachel Ward, Jenna said, standing her ground. She found me on campus. She knows everything, Adrian. She knows I've been with your men. She knows I was at the club. Adrian stopped 3 feet from her. His eyes were cold, searching her face for betrayal. Did you talk to her? Jenna felt a spark of indignation ignite in her chest. No. Did you take anything from her? Did she offer you a deal? She offered me witness protection. Jenna said, she told me you are going to fall. She said there was a rat in your organization feeding them information. Adrian let out a harsh, bitter laugh. And you believed her? You stood there and listened to her pitch. I listened because she made more sense than you do, Jenna shouted, her frustration boiling over. She told me I am collateral damage, and looking at you right now, looking at how you shut me out all day, I think she is right. Adrian's face twisted with anger. He stepped closer, towering over her. You have no idea what you're talking about. You are naive. Jenna, they will chew you up and spit you out just to get to me. Did you tell her about the safe? Did you tell her about the drive? Jenna stepped back, stinging as if he had slapped her. Is that what you think of me? After everything? I think people do desperate things when they are scared, Adrian roared. I lied for you, Jenna screamed back, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. I lied to the feds at the diner. I patched up your soldier in an alley. I almost took a bullet for you last night. I have risked my life, my degree, and my freedom for you, and you still look at me like I am just another loose end to be tied up. She poked him hard in the chest, her finger digging into his sternum. If you cannot trust me by now, Adrian, then let me go. Let me walk out that door and take my chances with the FBI, because I would rather be in a witness protection program than be with a man who waits for me to stab him in the back. She turned and marched toward the elevator. Jenna, she didn't stop. She hit the button, tears stinging her eyes. Adrian moved. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and grabbed her hand just as the elevator doors chimed. His grip was tight, desperate. She yanked her hand away, spinning around to face him. Her chest was heaving, tears finally spilling over her lashes. Am I just an asset? She demanded, her voice breaking. Am I just another thing you have to guard until it is inconvenient? No, Adrian shouted, the word tearing out of his throat. The silence that followed was heavy, vibrating with the energy of their shouting match. Adrian stood there, his chest rising and falling rapidly, his mask of control completely shattered. He looked at her, and for the first time, Jenna saw genuine terror in his eyes. I do not know how to do this, he admitted, his voice cracking. I do not know how to want something without owning it, my whole life. Jenna, my whole life has been about control. If I want it, I take it. If I want to keep it, I lock it down. He took a step toward her, his hands opening in a gesture of surrender. But I cannot own you, and that terrifies me. Because if I cannot control the situation, I cannot guarantee you are safe. When you told me about that agent, when I pictured you sitting in some gray FBI office, talking about me, erasing your life to get away from me. He stopped, swallowing hard, his gaze dropping to the floor. It felt like my chest was caving in. He whispered. Jenna watched him. The anger drained out of her, replaced by an aching softness. He wasn't pushing her away because he didn't care. He was pushing her away because he cared too much and didn't have the tools to handle it. He was a man who built walls, and she was the first thing he had ever wanted to let inside. Jenna took a shaky breath. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them. She reached out and placed her hand flat against his chest. Right over his heart, she could feel it thundering against her palm. I am not in an FBI office, she said softly. I am right here. Adrian looked down at her hand, then up at her face. The tension in his shoulders slowly unspooled. He let out a long, ragged exhale and covered her hand with his own, pressing it tighter against his chest. I am sorry, he murmured. He led her to the couch, not as a boss leading a subordinate, but as a man seeking comfort. They sat down, bodies turned toward each other, the space between them vanishing. Adrian reached out and tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered there, tracing the line of her jaw with a reverence that made Jenna's breath hitch. You unnerve me, he confessed quietly, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. I have stared down gunmen. I have negotiated with cartels, but you look at me with those eyes, and I forget how to think straight. You are doing okay, Jenna whispered, leaning into his touch. He smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his face. He leaned in, and this time, there was no rush. Their lips met in a slow, lingering kiss. It was nothing like the frantic collision in the office. This was soft, exploratory, a silent conversation of apologies and admissions. Jenna sighed into his mouth, her hands coming up to rest on his shoulders. Adrian's hands settled on her thighs, his thumbs rubbing soothing circles against the denim of her jeans. He pulled her closer until her legs were draped over his lap. He kissed her deeply, savoring the taste of her, his forehead resting against hers when they broke apart for air. "I am not going anywhere," she promised, interlacing her fingers with his. Adrian kissed her knuckles. "One by one, I know, and I am going to figure out how to keep you safe without locking you in a tower." The quiet intimacy of the evening was shattered 2 hours later by a phone call. Adrian took it on the balcony, his face shifting from relaxed to grim in a matter of seconds. When he came back inside, the walls were back up, though this time, he didn't shut Jenna out. He looked at her with a grim determination. They hit the warehouse in the industrial district. He said, "The one where I keep the secondary financial records." Jenna stood up. "The Kellers?" "Yes." And they knew exactly which crates to burn. Adrian paced the living room, his mind working furiously. "Agent Ward was right. There is a leak. Someone close to me is feeding them locations. If they know about the warehouse, they might know about the office safe. We got lucky last night, but I cannot leave the ledger and the drive in the club anymore." "Where can you put them?" Jenna asked. "Banks are too risky. Your other properties might be compromised." Adrian stopped pacing. He looked at her. "I need a place that has no connection to me. No paper trail. No guards that can be bribed. Something mundane." He grabbed his coat. "Get your shoes. We are going for a ride." They drove to a 24-hour public storage facility on the outskirts of town, a place of orange metal doors and flickering halogen lights. It was the kind of place where people stored old furniture and forgotten memories. Adrian rented a small locker under the name John Smith, paying in cash for a year up front. Inside the cold, dusty metal box, he placed the heavy ledger in the silver encrypted drive. He locked it with a heavy-duty padlock and handed Jenna the key for a moment. "Look at the number," he said. "Unit 412, memorize it." Jenna looked at the number, then at him. "Why me?" "Because you are the only person I know for a fact is not on a payroll," Adrian said seriously. "Only you and I know this exists. If anything happens to me, this is your insurance." Jenna handed the key back, her fingers brushing his. "Nothing is going to happen to you." The next morning brought a different kind of disaster. Jenna returned to her apartment to pick up some clothes, only to find a bright orange piece of paper taped to her front door. "Notice to vacate." She stared at it, her stomach dropping to her shoes. She ripped it off the wood and read the fine print. Repeated disturbances, safety concerns regarding tenants' visitors, police activity. Her landlord stepped out of the adjacent apartment, looking apologetic but firm. "I am sorry, Jenna. The other tenants are scared. I have had cops here twice this week. I cannot have this kind of trouble in my building. You have 30 days, but I would prefer if you left sooner." Jenna stood in the hallway, clutching the notice. This apartment was small and drafty, but it was hers. It was the only independence she had. Now, because of her association with Adrian. She was homeless. She went inside, sat on her bed, and stared at the wall. She felt defeated. The walls of her normal life were crumbling, and she had nowhere left to turn. She pulled out her phone and dialed Adrian. "Hey," he answered on the first ring. "Is everything okay?" "No," Jenna said, her voice small. "I just got evicted." There was a pause on the line. "What?" "My landlord kicked me out. Too many black cars. Too many scary men. He says I'm a safety risk." She heard Adrian let out a sharp breath. "I will fix it. I will buy the building. I will fire the landlord." "No." "Adrian," Jenna said, by squeezing her eyes shut, "you cannot just buy my problems away. That is what started all of this. I do not want you to buy the building. I do not have anywhere to go." Silence stretched over the line. Then, Adrian's voice came back, softer this time. "Come to the safe house, not the high-rise. I have a place in the suburbs. It is quiet. It has a spare room. It is secure. Jenna, you will be safe there." Jenna hesitated. Moving in with him, even into a safe house, felt like crossing a final line. It was an admission that her old life was gone. But looking around her room, at the boxes she would have to pack alone, she knew she had no choice. "Okay," she whispered. That evening, the atmosphere was surreal. Adrian Moretti, the most feared man in Harborview, was in her apartment, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, helping her tape up cardboard boxes. There was a quiet domesticity to it that felt jarringly normal. They worked in tandem. Adrian was surprisingly efficient at packing books, lifting heavy boxes that Jenna would have struggled with. At one point, Adrian picked up a hideous ceramic lamp from her bedside table. It was shaped like a cat playing a saxophone. "You are actually keeping this?" he asked. Raising an eyebrow, Jenna snatched it from him, laughing. "Hey, my grandmother gave me that. It is sentimental." Adrian chuckled, a low rumble of a sound that Jenna felt in her toes. "Remind me never to hire your grandmother as an interior decorator." Jenna swatted his arm. "Just put it in the box. Wise guy." They laughed, and for a moment they weren't a mafia boss and a witness. They were just two people moving house. The drive to the new safe house was quiet. The house was a modest 2-story colonial in a leafy neighborhood, completely unassuming. Inside, it was furnished comfortably, far less sterile than the high-rise. Adrian carried her boxes upstairs. "This is your room," he said, opening a door at the end of the hall. It was nice. A big bed, a window looking out over the backyard, a desk for her studies. It was thoughtful. "Thank you," Jenna said, standing in the doorway. Adrian stood in the hall. His room was directly across from hers. He leaned against the door frame, looking at her with an expression that was hard to read, protective, weary, and deeply affectionate. "You should get some sleep," he said. "It has been a long day." Jenna nodded. She didn't want him to go. The house was big, and the silence was heavy. "Adrian," she said. He paused. "Yeah? Thank you for helping me. With the boxes. With everything." Adrian stepped closer. He reached out and took her hand, his thumb grazing over her knuckles. "I am sorry you lost your place. Jenna, I never wanted to take that from you. I know," she said. He leaned down and kissed her. It started soft, a goodnight kiss. But Jenna sighed and stepped into him, looping her arms around his neck. Adrian's arms went around her waist, pulling her flush against him. The kiss deepened, becoming hungry, filled with the unspoken promise of the night before. They stood there in the hallway, clinging to each other, the air thick with desire. It would be so easy to pull him into her room, so easy to forget the danger and the eviction and the FBI. But Adrian pulled back first. He rested his forehead against hers, breathing hard. "Good night, Jenna," he whispered, his voice strained. "Good night," she replied, her lips swollen. He stepped back and opened the door to his room. Jenna went into hers. They closed their doors at the same time. The click of the latches echoed in the hallway. Jenna lay down on the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling. She could hear Adrian moving around in the room across the hall. She knew, with absolute certainty, that he was staring at his ceiling too, just as wide awake as she was. The wall between them separated their bodies, but it did nothing to stop the gravitational pull that was dragging them closer to the edge. The walls of Adrian Moretti's empire were not crumbling from the outside. They were rotting from within. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the truth finally landed on Adrian's desk in the form of a decrypted call log. Luca stood by the window of the temporary safe house, his posture rigid. The rain battered the glass, distorting the suburban street outside into a gray smear. "It is confirmed," Luca said, his voice devoid of its usual steady calm. "Marco has been in contact with the Keller crew 4 times in the last week. And there is a ping on his burner phone from a tower near the FBI field office." Adrian stared at the paper in his hand. Marco. The man he had pulled out of the gutter 10 years ago, the man who had eaten at his table, laughed at his jokes and guarded his back. The betrayal tasted like ash in his mouth. "He's selling us out," Adrian said, the paper crumping in his fist. "He's feeding the Kellers our locations and giving the feds just enough to keep himself out of jail when the hammer drops. We have to move on him," Luca advised. "Tonight, No, Adrian said, his eyes cold and hard as flint. If we move now, we spook the feds. We need to feed him disinformation. We need to flush out exactly what he has told them. But even as he strategized, a cold knot of dread tightened in Adrian's stomach. If Marco was talking, no secret was safe, and the biggest secret he currently held was not a shipment of drugs or a weapon stash. It was the location of the ledger that could bury them all. Jenna Morales felt the pressure too, though hers came in the form of a beige trench coat and a relentless stare. She was leaving the university library, her head down against the wind, when Agent Rachel Ward stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. There was no preamble this time, no polite invitation to sit on a bench. Ward blocked her path, her face grim. "You are running out of time. Jenna?" Jenna tried to step around her. "I have nothing to say to you." Ward grabbed her arm, not roughly, but with an urgency that made Jenna freeze. She pulled a manila envelope from her bag and shoved a stack of photographs into Jenna's hands. "Look at them," Ward commanded. Jenna looked down. The photos were glossy and brutal. One showed Adrian shaking hands with a politician who was currently under indictment. Another showed a body covered in a sheet on the docks. A third showed Adrian standing over a man in a chair, his face twisted in a snarl of violence that Jenna had never seen directed at her. "This is the man you are protecting," Ward said, her voice sharp. "He is a killer, Jenna. He corrupts everything he touches. And right now, he's drowning." "I do not care," Jenna said, trying to shove the photos back. "You should," Ward snapped. "Because we know about the records. We know there is a ledger. We know there is a hard drive. And we know you are the only civilian he trusts. When the Kellers make their move, and they will make it soon, they are going to come for you to get to those records." Jenna pulled her arm free, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I do not know where any records are." Ward's eyes narrowed. "Do not lie to me. If you do not give us the location, we cannot protect you, and when Adrian falls, you will be the one left bleeding in the rubble." Jenna turned and ran. She didn't look back, but the image of the body on the docks burned in her mind. She drove back to the suburban safe house, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. The paranoia was suffocating. Every car in the rearview mirror looked suspicious. Every shadow looked like a gunman. When she arrived, the house was empty. Adrian was gone. Likely dealing with the crisis Luca had mentioned, Jenna paced the living room, the silence amplifying her fear. Agent Ward's words echoed in her head. "They are going to come for you to get to those records." She felt exposed. She felt like the weak link. If the feds knew about the ledger, and the Kellers were circling, was the storage unit really safe? What if she had been followed the night they moved it? She needed to know. She needed to be sure. She pulled out her phone and dialed Adrian. It went straight to voicemail. "Adrian, it is me," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I am freaking out. The agent cornered me again." She mentioned the records specifically. I have a bad feeling. I am going to check the locker. I just need to see that it is still there, that it is safe. Call me back." She hung up, grabbed her keys, and headed out the door. She did not see the dark sedan parked 3 houses down, hidden beneath the overhanging branches of an oak tree. She did not see Marco sitting in the driver's seat, lowering a pair of high-powered binoculars, and she certainly did not know that he had tapped into the local cell tower frequencies. Intercepting the unencrypted voicemail she had just left, Marco smiled, a cold, predatory expression. He typed a text message to a number that did not exist in any contact list. "She is moving. Target is the locker. I will meet you there." 2 hours later. Adrian pulled his car into the deserted parking structure on the west side of the city. He was there to meet a contact who promised intel on the Keller operation, a meeting Marco had arranged. The structure was concrete and shadows, the air thick with the smell of oil and damp dust. Adrian stepped out of his car, his hand hovering near the gun holstered beneath his jacket. Something was wrong. The silence was too heavy. His phone buzzed. It was Luca. "Boss, the contact is not coming. We just found his body in the river. It is a setup. Get out of there." Adrian spun around, reaching for his door handle, but headlights blinded him from the ramp above. A van screeched around the corner, side door sliding open. Automatic gunfire erupted, chewing up the concrete at his feet. Adrian threw himself behind the engine block of his car. Drawing his weapon, he returned fire, the loud cracks echoing like thunder in the enclosed space. Glass shattered. Tires squealed. It was an ambush, and it was sloppy, meant to pin him down, not necessarily to kill him instantly. They were stalling him. Why? Realization hit him like a physical blow. Marco had set this up. Marco knew he would be here, which meant Marco was not here. Adrian fired 3 rounds, forcing the shooters to duck, and scrambled into the driver's seat. He slammed the car into reverse, tires smoking as he whipped the vehicle around, scraping the concrete pillar. He gunned the engine, speeding toward the exit ramp, risking the hail of bullets that pinged off his rear bumper. As he tore out onto the street, his phone buzzed again with a delayed notification, a voicemail from Jenna. He played it on speaker as he weaved through traffic at 90 miles an hour. "I am going to check the locker." Adrian's blood ran cold. Marco knew. The ambush was a distraction. They were not trying to kill Adrian. They were trying to keep him busy while they went for the ledger. And Jenna had just walked right into the trap. "Luca!" Adrian roared into the phone. "Track Jenna's phone. Send everyone to the storage facility on 4th. Everyone." The public storage facility was a maze of orange doors and fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry hornets. It was 10 o'clock at night and the hallways were empty. Jenna walked down the corridor of the 4th floor, her footsteps echoing on the concrete. She clutched the key in her pocket, her palms sweating. She reached Unit 412. The padlock was still there. It looked untouched. She let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. It was safe. She was just being paranoid. She reached out to touch the lock, just to be sure. "Don't," a voice said from behind her. Jenna spun around. 3 men stepped out from the intersecting hallway. They were not wearing suits. They wore tactical gear and masks. In their hands were guns, pointed directly at her chest. Jenna backed up, hitting the cold metal of the locker door. "Who are you?" One of the men holstered his weapon and moved toward her. He was big, smelling of stale tobacco and violence. He didn't answer. He grabbed her by the hair and slammed her against the wall. "Open it," he growled. Jenna gasped, pain radiating through her skull. "I do not have the key," she lied, her voice shaking. The man laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "We know you have the key, sweetheart, and we know you have the code." He dragged her, not toward the exit, but toward a maintenance room at the end of the hall. Jenna kicked and screamed, her heels skidding on the polished concrete, but she was no match for his strength. He threw her inside, and she crashed into a stack of metal chairs. Before she could scramble up, they were on her. They shoved her into a chair, zip-tying her wrists behind her back so tight the plastic bit into her skin. The leader of the group pulled off his mask. He had a scar running down his chin. "Here is how this works," he said, pulling a knife from his belt and tapping the flat of the blade against her cheek. "You give us the combination to the padlock. Then you give us the password to the drive. If you do that, maybe you walk out of here." "I do not know the codes," Jenna said, staring him in the eye. He sighed, as if disappointed. Then he backhanded her. The force of the blow snapped her head to the side, her lips split against her teeth, the metallic taste of blood filling her mouth. "Don't play the hero," the man said. "Adrian Moretti is dead by now, or he will be soon. We can make this look like a robbery gone wrong, or we can make it look like you flipped. We can leave your body here with a wire taped to your chest. Adrian's people will think you betrayed him. His memory of you will be that you were a rat." Jenna spat blood onto the floor. "Do whatever you want," she rasped. "I am not telling you a thing." The beating that followed was not theatrical. It was cold and efficient. They struck her across the face and ribs, enough to cause pain, enough to bruise, but careful not to knock her unconscious. They needed her awake. Jenna squeezed her eyes shut as a fist connected with her brow, splitting the skin. Blood trickled down into her eye, blinding her on one side. She focused on one thing, the memory of Adrian's hand over her heart, the way he had looked at her in the safe house. "I do not know how to want something without owning it." She would not let them own her, and she would not let them destroy him. The door opened. A new figure walked in. "Enough," the newcomer said. Jenna blinked through the blood. She knew that voice. Marco stepped into the light. He looked impeccably dressed, untouched by the violence. He looked down at her with a pitiable expression. "Marco," Jenna whispered. He crouched in front of her, taking a handkerchief from his pocket and reaching out to dab at the cut on her eyebrow. Jenna recoiled, flinching away from his touch. "Jenna, listen to me," Marco said softly. "You are a smart girl. You are a good person. You do not belong in this life. Adrian dragged you into this. He used you, and he did not use me." Jenna spat. "He's going to get you killed." Marco continued, his voice soothing, reasonable. "Just give me the code. I can make them stop. I can get you out of here. You can disappear. Start over. Adrian is finished. Why die for a man who put you in this chair?" Jenna looked at him. She saw the ambition in his eyes, the hollowness. "Because he trusted you," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "He treated you like a brother, and you were going to burn this whole city down just to be king of the ashes." Marco's expression hardened. The mask of sympathy vanished, replaced by a flash of pure, unadulterated rage. He stood up and struck her, hard. His ring caught the wound on her eyebrow, reopening it. Jenna cried out, her head lolling forward. "He is not a brother," Marco hissed. "He's a tyrant, and you are just a stubborn little waitress who does not know when to fold." He turned to the men. "Cut the ties, bring her to the locker. If she does not open it, we start breaking fingers." One of the men stepped forward and sliced the zip tie binding her wrists. Jenna's hands fell free. Her circulation roared back, prickling with pain. "Get up," the man ordered, grabbing her arm. Jenna stumbled to her feet. She swayed, dizzy from the blows. As the man adjusted his grip to shove her toward the door, Jenna saw her chance. It was a desperate, 1 in a million shot. They were standing near a floor drain in the center of the maintenance room, a grate with wide slots designed for industrial cleanup. Jenna reached into her pocket. Her fingers closed around the cold metal of the locker key. She didn't try to run. She didn't try to fight them. She lunged toward the ground. "What is she doing?" Marco shouted. Jenna slammed her hand toward the drain. She released the key. With a sickening clink, the small piece of brass slipped through the metal grate and vanished into the dark, sludge-filled sewer line below. "No!" The guard yelled. He lunged for her, raising his pistol. In the chaotic scuffle, his finger slipped on the trigger. Bang! The sound was deafening in the small concrete room. Jenna felt a searing, white-hot line of fire tear across her side. The bullet grazed her ribs, ripping through her shirt and slicing a deep trench through her skin. She gasped, the air leaving her lungs, and crumpled to the cold concrete floor. She pressed her hand to her side, and it came away wet and warm. "You idiot!" Marco screamed at the guard. "You shot her!" "She dropped the key," the guard yelled back, panic rising in his voice. "It is down the drain." Marco ran to the grate, peering into the darkness. It was gone. The key to the physical padlock. The only way to get into the locker without heavy industrial equipment that would alert the whole facility was gone. Jenna lay curled on the floor, her vision graying at the edges. The pain was sharp and blinding, radiating from her side with every shallow breath. Blood pooled beneath her, staining the gray floor crimson. She had done it. She had bled to keep his secrets. Adrian's car screeched to a halt in front of the storage facility, mounting the curb. He didn't wait to park. He threw the door open and sprinted toward the glass doors, his gun drawn. Luca and 3 other men were right behind him, their SUVs boxing in the entrance. "Move!" Adrian roared. They burst into the lobby. The night manager cowered behind the desk. "Hands up! 4th floor!" Adrian shouted at his men. They hit the stairs, bypassing the slow elevator. Adrian took the steps 3 at a time, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He had a text on his phone from Luca. "Feds are raiding the south side. They know about the decoy. They are pivoting." Everyone was converging. Adrian burst onto the 4th floor landing. He heard shouting coming from a maintenance room down the hall. He didn't hesitate. He moved down the corridor, weapon raised, his movements fluid and lethal. Marco stepped out of the maintenance room, dragging Jenna by her arm. She was limp, her feet dragging, blood soaking the side of her shirt. Adrian froze. The sight of her, battered, bleeding, barely conscious, felt like a knife twisting in his own gut. Marco saw him. He jerked Jenna up, wrapping an arm around her throat and pressing a gun to her temple. "Back off! Adrian!" Marco screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "Back off or she dies!" Adrian stopped 10 feet away. His men fanned out behind him, guns trained on Marco and the 2 Keller thugs who emerged behind him. The hallway went deadly silent. "Let her go." "Marco," Adrian said. His voice was terrifyingly calm, a low rumble that vibrated with the promise of violence. "You lost. Adrian," Marco yelled, backing up toward the emergency exit. "The feds are coming. The Kellers are coming. It is over. If you hurt her," Adrian said, taking a slow step forward, "there is no hole deep enough on this earth for you to hide in. I will find you, and I will take a very long time to kill you." Jenna's eyes fluttered open. She saw Adrian. He was blurry, a dark shape in the fluorescent haze, but she knew him. She saw the terror in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. She tried to stand, to take the weight off Marco's arm, but her legs refused to work. The pain in her side was a living thing, eating her alive. "Adrian," she whispered, though he couldn't hear her. Marco tightened his grip, the barrel of the gun digging into her skin. "Drop the gun, Adrian," Marco ordered. "Drop it." Adrian hesitated. He looked at Jenna. He saw the blood dripping from her eyebrow, the dark stain spreading on her shirt. He saw the woman who had refused his money, refused his protection. And now, he realized with a sickening jolt, had refused to give him up. She was the only thing that mattered, slowly. Adrian Moretti, the man who never surrendered, bent his knees and set his gun on the floor. "Let her go," he repeated. Marco grinned, a manic, triumphant look. But Jenna was not done. She felt Marco shift his weight, distracted by his victory. She summoned every ounce of strength left in her batteried body. She didn't have the strength to fight, but she had enough to fall. She went dead weight. Marco stumbled, his grip slipping on her slick, bloodied arm. "Now!" Jenna screamed, her voice raw. Adrian moved. He didn't reach for his gun on the floor. He launched himself forward, a blur of motion, tackling Marco before the traitor could regain his balance. Gunshots rang out, deafening, chaotic, as Luca and the team opened fire on the Keller men, but Adrian only saw Marco. He slammed the traitor into the wall, his hands finding Marco's throat, squeezing with the force of a man who had almost lost his soul. It was chaos. It was war. And in the center of it, Jenna lay on the concrete, watching the ceiling spin, holding her hand over her wound, waiting for the darkness to take her. The corridor of the storage facility was a cacophony of shouting, shattering glass, and the deafening cracks of gunfire. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burnt gunpowder and fear. Adrian Moretti moved through the chaos like a wraith, his vision tunneling down to a single objective. He had to get to her. Ahead of him, his men engaged the remaining Keller thugs in a fierce exchange. Bullets chipped away at the concrete walls, sending dust raining down into the fluorescent light. Adrian ignored it all, stepping over debris, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs that drowned out the noise of the battle. Then he rounded the corner, and the world stopped. Marco was backed against the far wall near the emergency exit. He had Jenna. He was dragging her upright, his arm hooked around her throat, using her body as a shield. Adrian's breath hitched. Jenna looked broken. Her head lolled to the side. Her face was a map of bruises, and blood, too much blood, was soaking the white fabric of her shirt at her waist, dripping onto the gray floor with terrifying consistency. "Stop!" Adrian roared, his voice tearing through the din. The gunfire faltered, then died out as everyone in the hallway realized the stakes. Silence slammed into the corridor, heavy and suffocating. Marco laughed, a jagged, desperate sound. He pressed the barrel of his gun into Jenna's temple. She winced, a small, pained sound escaping her lips. "Stay back," Marco screamed, his eyes wild. "You take one more step, Adrian, and I swear to God, I will end it right here." Adrian froze. His gun was raised, leveled at Marco's head, but he couldn't take the shot. Marco was shaking, and Jenna was swaying in his grip, her knees buckling. If she fell, if Marco flinched, let her go. Marco, Adrian said, his voice low and vibrating with a lethal promise. You are done. The Kellers are gone. The feds are outside. There is nowhere to go. Do not make this worse. Worse? Marco spat. You did this. You went soft. Adrian, you jeopardized everything for a waitress with principles. Look at her. She is bleeding out because of you. Jenna blinked, her vision swimming. She heard Adrian's voice, and it was an anchor in the swirling darkness. She focused on him. He looked terrified, not angry, not commanding, terrified. He was looking at her like she was the only thing holding the universe together. She couldn't let Marco win. She couldn't let Adrian be the one to watch her die helpless. Jenna gritted her teeth against the agony in her side. She summoned every ounce of strength left in her batteried body. She waited for Marco to shift his weight as he screamed another insult at Adrian. Now. Jenna threw her head back, slamming her skull into Marco's nose. It wasn't a hard blow, but it was unexpected. Marco howled in pain, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. Jenna didn't stop. She twisted her body, shoving him with her shoulder, throwing him off balance. She collapsed to the floor, falling out of the line of fire. Adrian didn't hesitate. The moment Jenna was clear, he pulled the trigger. 2 shots rang out. Marco crumpled to the ground, his gun clattering away across the concrete. Adrian dropped his weapon instantly. He didn't check on Marco. He didn't look at his men. He sprinted the 10 feet to where Jenna lay curled on the cold floor. Jenna! He slid to his knees beside her, his hands hovering over her body, shaking violently. He was terrified to touch her, terrified he would break her further. Adrian, she whispered, her voice barely a breath. He saw the wound on her side. The blood was flowing freely now, dark and slick. Adrian made a choked sound in his throat. He pressed his palms directly over the tear in her skin, applying pressure. No, 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 stay with me, he begged, his voice cracking. Jenna, look at me. Stay with me, Jenna hissed in pain, her hands fluttering up to grip his wrists. She looked at his shirt, his pristine, expensive white dress shirt, now stained with her blood. You, she rasped, a weak smile touching her split lip. You finally got your shirt dirty. Adrian let out a sob that was half laugh, half agony. I do not care about the shirt. I do not care about anything but you. Do not close your eyes. Do you hear me? Do not close your eyes. Jenna's grip on his wrists weakened. Her fingers curled into the fabric of his sleeves. Holding on. I'm tired. No, Adrian barked, panic seizing him. He scooped her up into his arms, ignoring the strain, ignoring the blood soaking into his suit. He stood up, clutching her to his chest as if he could physically hold her soul inside her body. Move, he screamed at his men. Clear the exit, burn the tapes, get the car. He ran down the hallway, carrying the woman who had refused his money, refused his protection, and had just paid for his life with her own blood. The waiting room of St. Jude's Hospital was a purgatory of white walls and ticking clocks. Adrian paced the linoleum floor, his jacket discarded, his shirt stiff with dried blood. He refused to leave. He refused to wash his hands. He needed the reminder of what his world had done to her. The doors swung open, but it wasn't a doctor. It was Agent Rachel Ward. She looked tired. She was flanked by 2 uniformed officers. She saw Adrian, saw the blood on his hands, and she paused. Adrian Moretti, she said, her voice lacking its usual bite. We have warrants. We have Marco's testimony from before he died. It is over. Adrian stopped pacing. He looked at her. His eyes were hollow. Dead things. Jenna is in surgery, he said flatly. I know. Ward said, Ward. And when she wakes up, if she wakes up, she is going to be questioned. She is an accessory. Adrian, she was at the scene. She knows about the ledger. Adrian walked toward her. The officers tensed, hands moving to their holsters, but Ward held up a hand to stop them. Adrian stopped 2 feet from her. He looked at the floor, then up at her. She knows nothing, he said quietly. She was a hostage. Marco took her. She never saw the ledger. She never saw the drive. Ward raised an eyebrow. You expect me to believe that? No, Adrian said. I expect you to trade. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, silver key. It was a duplicate. The original was in a sewer drain, but this one opened a safety deposit box in the Cayman Islands. You want the Kellers? Adrian asked. You want the Port Authority corruption? You want the judges who have been taking bribes for 10 years? Ward stared at the key. What is this? This is everything, Adrian said. It is enough to close 50 cases. It is enough to make your career. And what do you want? Ward asked, her eyes narrowing. Immunity for yourself? No, Adrian said. I want her name scrubbed. Jenna Morales was a victim. She was a bystander. She testifies to nothing. She goes to no court. She walks away clean. Ward looked at him, stunned. You are giving up your leverage. You are dismantling your own operation. Adrian looked at the operating room doors. I do not care about the operation. I do not care about the leverage. If she wakes up and has to look over her shoulder for the rest of her life, then none of it matters. He held out the key. Take it, he said. But she is off limits. Forever. Ward looked at the key, then at the desperate, broken man standing in front of her. She saw the blood on his hands. She realized, for the first time, that the monster of Harborview had a heart, and it was currently lying on an operating table. She took the key. If this is real, Ward said quietly, Jenna Morales was never here. The beep of the heart monitor was the first thing Jenna heard. It was a steady, rhythmic sound that pulled her up from the deep, dark water of unconsciousness. She opened her eyes. The light was soft, dim. She was in a hospital room. She tried to move, and a sharp pain flared in her side. She gasped. Easy, a voice murmured. She turned her head. Adrian was sitting in a chair beside her bed. He looked wrecked. He had showered and changed into a plain black t-shirt, but his eyes were red-rimmed, his face pale beneath the stubble on his jaw. He was holding her hand. He was holding it with both of his, bringing it to his lips as he saw her eyes focus. Hey, he whispered, his voice raw. Jenna blinked, tears prickling in her eyes. I am alive? Yeah, Adrian choked out. You are alive. You are here. Jenna looked at him. She remembered the storage locker, the gun, the drain, the ledger. She whispered. Gone, Adrian said quickly. It does not matter. None of it matters. The Kellers are done. Marco is gone. The feds. We made a deal. You are safe. Jenna, truly safe. Jenna squeezed his hand weakly. You gave it up? Adrian leaned forward, resting his forehead against their joined hands. You bled for me, Jenna. You took a bullet because you would not give up my secrets. Did you really think I would keep them if it meant losing you? He lifted his head and looked at her. The vulnerability in his eyes was naked, terrifyingly open. I will spend whatever life I have left making sure you never have to bleed for me again, he vowed. Jenna reached up with her free hand. Her fingers were shaking. She touched his cheek, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. He leaned into her touch, closing his eyes, letting out a long, shuddering breath. Adrian leaned in, careful of the tubes, careful of her bandages. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, slow, reverent, a benediction. Then he moved down to her lips. It was not a kiss of passion or hunger. It was a kiss of gratitude. It was soft, lingering, and filled with a depth of emotion that made Jenna's chest ache. She felt his thumb brush away a tear that had escaped from the corner of her eye. Her hand curled into the collar of his t-shirt, holding him there, anchoring him as he had anchored her. They stayed like that for a long time, in the quiet of the hospital room. Two survivors who had found the only thing worth fighting for. 6 weeks later, the autumn air in Harborview was crisp, smelling of the ocean and turning leaves. Jenna stood on the balcony of a third-floor apartment. It was a nice place. Brick walls, big windows, overlooking the park. It wasn't a penthouse. It wasn't a fortress. It was a home. She touched her side instinctively. The scar was still pink, a jagged line across her ribs. But it was healing. It was a part of her now, a map of where she had been. The glass door slid open behind her. Adrian stepped out. He looked different. The hard edge of the mafia boss was softened. He wore a simple sweater and jeans. He was still dangerous. That would never fully go away, but the weight of the empire was gone. He had kept his word. The violent parts of his business were dismantled. He was running logistics now, clean shipping, boring contracts. He was poorer, safer, and infinitely happier. He wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, pulling her back against his chest. Jenna leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. She placed her hands over his, threading her fingers through his strong ones. "Agent Ward called today," Jenna said quietly. "She said the case against the corrupt judges is closed. They are all going to prison." "Good," Adrian murmured into her hair. "They deserve it." Jenna turned in his arms to face him. She looked up at him, studying the man who had terrified her, infuriated her, and saved her. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The power, the control." Adrian looked out at the city lights. He looked at the skyline he used to think he owned. Then he looked down at Jenna. He saw the scar he knew was hidden beneath her shirt. He saw the light in her eyes. "I miss nothing," he said. He tightened his arm around her waist, pulling her flush against him. A teasing glint entered his eyes. "Besides," he murmured, his thumb grazing her hip, "I finally got the girl who refused my money. That is a bigger win than owning this city ever was." Jenna laughed, a soft, happy sound that drifted out into the night air. She reached up and wrapped her arms around his neck. "You are still arrogant," she whispered, smiling, "and you are still stubborn," he countered, lowering his head. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him. It was a choice. It was a promise. And this time, standing on their balcony in the city that had tried to break them, there was no fear. Only them. Thank you so much for reading this story. Mafia boss despised the girl who refused his money until she bled, protecting his secrets. It has been an emotional journey writing Adrian and Jenna's story. From their tense meeting in the diner to their final moment of peace. I would love to know what you thought of the ending. Please leave a comment down below telling me where you are listening from and what your favorite part of the story was. If you enjoyed this, please make sure to subscribe to the Mafia Romance Stories channel for more intense, emotional, and romantic tales. I can't wait to share the next one with you.